Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us this week for Generation Digital Workforce. This is Zena coming at you from Austin, Texas. You're going to be super stoked you joined us this week because I have with me Matt Parsons. Matt, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Zena, for having me.
Awesome. So Matt, tell my listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I've been here at Blue Prism now for over 3 years. But prior to Blue Prism, I was in the automation space. So, since I graduated college, I've really been spending, all my time in automation and integration. And so, it's been a really, really exciting past 3 years as I've gotten to kind of mature in this space and see it mature as well.
Awesome. Where are you today, Matt?
I'm out of Austin, Texas. It's home base for me.
Awesome. So you're here too. Never sure where my guests are dialing in from on any given day. Well, you mentioned earlier that you had been with Blue Prism now for about 3 years. I know that you have had the luxury, I'll say, of working with many of our customers here across the Americas. Can you share with us a little bit about those customers that are using the digital workforce today here in the Americas and how they go about developing the maturity of their practices?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I've really been focusing most of my time here, across a couple of different areas, but mainly in the supply chain and with kind of a hyper focus on retail. And that focus in retail has led me to bring on some of the largest retailers in the world who are now using Blue Prism to build out and automate, with a digital workforce. And so, things have definitely changed over the last 3 years and how organizations are approaching things and looking at it now. But a lot of it comes down to, just how quickly they can bring in this technology and adopt it internally. A lot of organizations, really still live in a bespoke world where, IT is doing IT things and business is doing business things, and you aren't finding the proper marriage between business and IT. And I really think that that's probably been the biggest revolutionary change that, implementing a digital workforce brings to an organization. It forces a company, if they really want to do it right, to democratize IT and to demystify it to some extent and make it more business and user friendly, but still have the same robust technological capabilities that, previously they would have had to wait for IT to deliver. Now it really becomes a partnership between business and IT to be successful when you're rolling out this digital workforce. So I would say that, that's probably definitely been the most interesting thing to see is that, this has really forced these organizations to change in a way that, that maybe they haven't been built to even deliver. And what that allows them to do is think more outside the box and kind of change the way that they do business, which is, what's going to keep them the leaders in the market.
I love it. Think outside the box. I think that's definitely what the businesses that are leveraging digital workers are doing today in many cases. Can you tell us a little bit about how companies get there? So I'm sure you have the opportunity to work with businesses who have yet to employ digital workers, as well as those who have deployed hundreds, if not thousands of digital workers potentially. How do they get there? So companies who haven't started today, they might be a little fearful of the idea of hundreds of digital workers. Can you kind of walk us through that maturity curve, how companies build to having a digital workforce?
Yeah, there's definitely some key aspects to it, but I think it's important to understand what the maturity model is for an organization to be successful. And a lot of companies think that automation even today should be faster and easier than technologies can deliver today. So I think, we live in a world of high expectations and quick returns. which is completely understandable, but to totally transform the way that organizations do business with human laborers versus digital laborers, I think is something that, a lot of organizations haven't really sat back and just thought, well, what would this business look like if we had digital workers doing this? How would our humans interact with these organizations? And it's often this maturity curve that they have to go through before they can really reach what we kind of call the hockey stick, where they've established enough internally to support this initiative, and they've done enough internally with their organizational culture to transition from a data entry focus of the human workers to a more analytical focus. So with that being said, there really are 5 factors that I would say within rate and maturity that clients see. And usually the first phase is a project initialization. That could be a pilot, it could be a POC, but this is typically within the first 6 to 12 months of being introduced to a technology. And then they really have to work to get to phase 2. And phase 2 is where they've really identified more projects. They're typically still in a division versus all across an entire organization, but they've kind of proven the platform. Usually at this phase, we're lacking a few important aspects that organizations need to scale. Typically, it's a robust pipeline of processes. They are lacking that. They're typically lacking, a really solid, formal, built-out team. So often they're depending on third parties like Blue Prism or a robust partner network of certified partners to help them deliver and do and support their automations in production. I'd also say that we often see at phase 2, there isn't any C-suite engagement, or in some cases, any visibility at all. And typically it's maybe a leader in finance or in HR who's taken it on themselves to educate themselves on the market and feel like, this is a no-brainer for our team and wants to bring it in. And then it's typically an expansion out of there until they've had enough success to kind of get higher level buy-in. Once they've really kind of moved past some of those areas and they've maybe brought in some more executive sponsorships, very limited up to this point, but they really begin to develop a pipeline and are starting to understand that they need to be more aligned with the entire company's strategy. Typically starts to happen in phase 3. So they become, they start to really turn the corner in phase 3 and understand that, okay, well, we're really close to having a robust capability, but we're missing some key components here. Still maybe a little immature within their center of excellence and having enough people to support, a successful rollout and implementation, but are still leveraging partners and are ramping up their team pretty heavily. It's when we see this movement into phase 3 where an organization into phase 4 where organizations all of a sudden catch fire. It's really that hockey stick moment where, they've established enough internal governance, roles-based structure within the COE. They have all of the full-time employees they need committed to only doing automation. They have no other side jobs or anything like that. I mean, once they're at this level, anyone who's part of the COE is a full-time COE employee. But the more important thing is that at this level, I've never seen one at level phase 4 who's at the enterprise adoption level that didn't have direct C-level executive formal support. I think that that's a really big area where C-suites can even do their own organizations a disservice by sitting on the sidelines versus owning what ultimately this type of technology would drive in a company to get to scale and to really leverage digital workers so that you can take the next phase in automation, which is definitely different than just the base RPA. And we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But, at this phase, they may even be interacting with multiple delivery partners because their pipeline is so large and the value to get these automations in place is too great to wait with the resources you have internally. So it's definitely typically a multi-vendor approach. And then, you're really into the transformational state, which is stage 5, where you've automated as much as you possibly can across all your lines of businesses. And now you're operating at an efficiency that you've never seen before. Digital workers working 24/7, 365 days a year, and your human workforce working in complete concert with those digital workers, doing what they do best, which is people-to-people interaction, analytical interactions versus the data entry, where most, as I'm sure most listeners know, that's where the largest annual attrition is for the Fortune 500. So it's important that people feel fulfilled in their work, and data entry is often one of those places where that doesn't happen. So making people happier with their jobs is also an exciting aspect to this whole automation initiative that we work with clients on. Now,
yeah,
I did want to add to that, though, that it's important to set the right expectations when it comes to maturity. And if you were to have all of the things that you needed in the fourth phase where you're ready to do automation, you have the right C-suite executives. They've established an organizational vision, and they have it tied to their company strategy in very, very tightly. Then we see organizations reaching the enterprise adoption phase maybe at 2.5 years. But for most customers who are organically trying to bring this into their organization, and it takes time to proliferate to the C-suite, to that leadership, that's typically a 3 to 4 year process before they can hit that hockey stick. So, these organizations have spent decades growing and creating process on top of process. A lot of times it's even redundant because you had to worry about the humans and how humans interact with data and information, and ensuring that everyone's staying on the up and up from a governance perspective. But with digital workers, these are 100% audited, full non-repudiation from an audit perspective. So, you're able to streamline processes into best case scenario processes where if we were robots, what would we do? So I think understanding what your potential is based, to get to that scale is probably the hardest expectation internally too for organizations to take in, because they want to be doing it in 6 months. But in reality, there's only so much change an organization can go through annually, and they really have to take that into consideration if they don't want to disrupt the current workforce in a negative way.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point there. I was wanting to dig in a little bit with you around the barriers that are preventing faster adoption, and so it sounds like to some extent there at the end you were going to touch on that some of that is just the ability of the organization to adapt to change. Would you agree that that is a barrier?
It's a significant barrier, and it's probably one of the key areas that we see organizations, not taking head on day one. Change management isn't easy, and it's often expensive because you're having to retrain people, and you're completely redesigning at a full maturity the way that your business does work. And so, a lot of different things can become significant barriers, but ultimately what really causes the biggest barrier to really adopting and doing this faster is executive involvement and sponsorship. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with organizations and the C-suite just isn't even aware of what's going on here. And I think that's really a big disservice to the C-suite, number one, because they want to make sure they're doing right by their customers and employees, and that they're delivering the best in breed technologies to their teams so that they can support customers and clients in ways that helps them stay relevant within the market. So I would say if there's any executives out there listening today that how are you being involved in this process? How are you putting your stamp on the future vision of your organization, and what do you want this to look like? I think we're going to see some really amazing things here in the next 5 years or so, where organizations who maybe grew up a little bit leaner and were mainly competing in the mid-market against some of these enterprise giants that we see today. I do believe that because they took an automation-first approach and had an automation vision as executives, are going to blow past some of these bloated, process-laden, bureaucracies within organizations. And so I'm kind of excited to see that, because I think that we'll see, they really open up a whole new market of competition within technology and services that people are providing, no matter what it is: retail, logistics and transportation, travel and transportation, airlines, just the way that you interact inside of a store with your mobile app. There's some really, really exciting things that organizations are doing. And I think that, if these big organizations, the large mainstay enterprise companies, want to maintain their hold in their areas and markets, they're really going to have to get buy-in from that C-suite to own their automation vision in the future. And I think that's kind of part of that is delivering an effective change management strategy and the execution for that. You can't effectively, maybe you could change a department with the head of finance or the head of HR, but you're ultimately not changing the culture of an organization. And to really have this adopted organizationally and to scale and to transform your business, the C-suite has to really own that strategy and drive that through. And then through the change management, this is really where the magic happens, is that the C-suite's driving it, but they've also got to get the buy-in from the workers. And creating the right change management program will allow for organizations to do a bottom-up and a top-down approach. And this significantly truncates the time to market value clients will find in identifying processes, aligning to strategy, all the things that they need to be successful. So I really, really do encourage the C-suite to think, well, we want to make sure that, I think technology has been proven. That's not the problem. The problem really is the implementation and execution and attachment to the overall organizational vision. So, if anyone is in charge of the entire corporate strategy of the company, this should be one of their number one projects, and they should be taking it beyond serious, because we see clients who have implemented our technology and did take it seriously up front with their leadership. And, they're literally saying within 12 months, they're seeing large increases in their margins, especially in something like retail or even in restaurants, supply chain, where, margins are razor thin. Well, wouldn't it be great if you could kind of flip that on its head and increase your margins without having to do anything other than, increasing your efficiency internally, so you're no longer having to, eat margins that you normally would have, just because of how bloated the workforce was to keep up with the demand of process and work.
So I think that's an interesting point to continue to dig in on there, because a lot of our listeners probably don't actually know what digital workers can really do. So give us a real world example of what a digital worker can really do. So if I'm out there, let's take it from two different perspectives, Matt. Let's start with, I am the line manager and I'm trying to understand how to improve the efficiency within my department. So I'm that first use case where I don't really have executive buy-in, but I'm trying to figure out even what a digital worker could do for me. Let's start there. What can digital workers really do?
Well, I think it's important to kind of define a digital worker and know exactly what it is. And because there's so many different types of terms that are out there, RPA, RDA, hyperautomation, integrated automation platforms, and other, just everyone's kind of trying to make things up. And we're seeing terms kind of coalesce into different types of focus. But traditional RPA, truly what, the market was defined on, is end-to-end process automation. And what I mean by that is that, you have a process that you would give a person. And if you have a person were to walk into your office today and start a new job, and that job was to, let's say it's to close a general ledger reconciliation of some kind, they have a step-by-step rules-based process that they follow. And if someone understands the accounting rules and things like that, you could literally hand them step-by-step instructions. And, they should be competent enough to follow through each step individually. And if there's an issue, they're typically told, if you have a problem, then you send an email to so-and-so in a different group. Well, a digital worker really works in the exact same way. They're 100% deterministic in their pure state. And we can talk about, that, like I mentioned, hyper automation. That's kind of the next level of a digital worker where you're adding skills to it. But just the core RPA, these are deterministic, and they follow rules just as if a person would in their process. The key is that, they're not doing work outside of a digital environment. This is all digital white collar work. So automating any of those processes, closing the general ledger, reconciliations, like I mentioned, anything from just checking shipment times. Anything that a person would do, fully deterministic, if then that type rules. So imagine, within Blue Prism, you're able to design a process with a Visio flowchart. So, if you're trying to make a decision and you have two different decision trees that you have to follow on based on what information is presented to you, you would be able to apply that to a digital worker, and it would do exactly what you've asked it to do, nothing more and nothing less. So these digital workers are very, think of them truly as brainless robots that you've trained to do some work, and they do that work exactly as you want it, 100% of the time with 100% accuracy.
Okay, great. So now let's say that I'm the person that's in the transformational work world and I'm looking to how to transform my entire business. Where should I start and how should I think about it? Is there a particular department that is the best one to start in? Or how should I even think about eating that elephant, so to speak?
Well, you definitely don't want to eat the whole elephant at once. I don't know anyone that could, but
nope. That's what I hear.
That's right. But what we often want organizations to do in the beginning is to start in an area where you have a greater propensity for processes being documented. You know, I know that in banking and financial services, they're much more highly regulated than other industries, and being highly regulated means that so many of their processes have high level of governance and monitoring, policies and procedures surrounding them to ensure that, you know, there's accurate data quality and security. And most of these are digital because to keep up with the volume that interacts with the, you know, the global markets on a millisecond by millisecond basis, you know, decisions have to be made and executed properly. And so I often see organizations beginning in finance or HR just because those tend to be more regulated. And therefore you need tighter controls around those processes and the definitions of those processes for auditors to track them, whether it's a payroll compliance in California for a national or global company who needs to make sure they're paying employees on time or otherwise they're fined, to the same kind of concept within, you know, accounting. You know, if you can reduce your day sales outstanding because you can process invoices faster, then that allows you as an organization to recognize revenue faster. And I think any CFO knows that if you can do that, then, you know, you have more cash on hand and you're reducing your risk as an organization with your outstanding invoices and getting paid. So those are really the two areas that I find most organizations getting started. I also see companies getting started if they have a mature shared services area where HR and finance are kind of both supported. But, you know, that's really where I tell an organization, if you want to kick off and do a really solid pilot, you know, and I always recommend doing a production pilot because, you know, with the technology being proven in the market, it's important to really not waste your time with elongated POCs or things like that. You know, you really want to try to get value delivered as quickly as possible. So starting in those areas, you're probably going to have the greatest level of success because you're going to have easier processes that are not necessarily easier, but just much more documented. So your time to actual production is much faster. But I think if I were head of corporate strategy, before I do any of this, you know, I would really want to take a step back and say, you know, I want to know what my entire corporate automation potential is. If I were to put every process that I have into a Gartner grid of some kind that could, you know, put in all the different processes that I have and tell me, hey, are these ready? Are these not ready? What percentage of my organization is ready for automation today? Then all of a sudden an organization now has a place to start making a vision and start talking about a strategy to automate. So often organizations treat it as, you know, a project or a tool versus, you know, a strategy-based journey or a transformative journey. And I think that that's what it truly stifles their ability to scale and to go in on this. A lot of companies just want to stick a toe in the water and do a 1-year deal or things like that. And you know, I think that if they're going to commit to something like this, they need to understand that this is a 5 to 7 year journey, nothing less, you know, and maybe nothing more. But as of right now, if you want to have that success, you've got to take that more strategic approach. So, you know, to take a step back, it's really, really important to understand your automation potential. Otherwise, I'd argue that, you know, it would make sense that you wouldn't be able to scale out within your company or within different lines of businesses, because if no one knows what you're doing and you don't have any understanding of what the potential is, well, then, you know, what's the point of even looking at these things? So I think most companies who haven't, you know, dove in yet, you know, they're lacking the awareness, I believe, to understand their automation potential and try to craft a roadmap to transform their business in a way that is, you know, keeping in line with some of these new companies that are starting today, who are streamlined and 100% digital and aren't encumbered by the same, you know, rules and regulations and bureaucracy that some of these really mature organizations have been leading us through the last 20 years. So I think that's it's a really important thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few times you've mentioned Gartner, both in their way that they're now characterizing what they call hyper automation, as well as the overall maturity of how companies come into leveraging a transformational type product like robotic process automation, like Blue Prism can be. In their latest research, where they talk about hyper automation, and you touched on this a little bit earlier. Is hyperautomation tied to one of your five stages of the maturity curve, or is hyperautomation just a new way to talk about what we've seen sort of going on in the market and what you've seen over the last 3 years, just new words put to what we've already been seeing happening in the market?
Yeah, I do think that hyperautomation, it's not explicitly tied to the maturity model, but we typically see it starting to become more prevalent and thought of in stage 3, especially towards the mature end of stage 3 or phase 3, whenever they're jumping into, really getting full corporate buy-in and things like that. That's where we see organizations starting to really implement it. We see them kind of playing with it earlier, but ultimately, you've got to kind of build a foundation in order to take the next step in automation. And I think it's important, to understand what hyperautomation is. The definition of it that from Gartner, states that, hyperautomation deals with the application of advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence and machine learning, to increasingly automate processes and augment humans. And hyperautomation extends across a range of tools that can be automated, but also refers to the sophistication of the automation, such as discovering data, analyzing it, designing data, or process autonomously, automating all the automation, measuring, monitoring, reassessing, everything that you can imagine a person would be doing from an analytical perspective. You're actually applying those skills to your digital workers within RPA. And so, you almost want to think of these digital workers as, just robots that have been given explicit instructions all the time. And now we're injecting a little bit of intelligence into these digital workers. We're giving them machine learning and AI capability, whether it's the ability to read text and do natural language processing, or to look at a picture and determine whether this picture is a cartoon or live action, or if this picture is, what is this picture of? Is it a picture of a cityscape over the water, or is it a picture of a boy riding on a skateboard? Being able to take these organizations to that next level of automation. So imagine these digital workers as the arms and legs and doing all the work, but they have to be told exactly what to do. And now with hyper automation, we're really extending those capabilities by providing intelligent skills to digital workers. So now they have the eyes and the ears to kind of see and to interpret what they may not have been able to do previously, or that you had to pass to a person. So this is really the phase where you've gotten very mature from how your humans are going to be interacting with the software robot employees, those digital workers. And now you want to even change further how those humans are interacting with. Maybe there is a new machine learning or AI capability that will help enhance things. One of the areas that's kind of tackled first is, document processing, and automating that for invoices. We see a lot of clients who want to add intelligent skills like Microsoft Vision or Adobe FlexiCapture to a process. And if you could plug in those eyes and then the ability to use machine learning to extract and learn exactly what on a form like that can do, we have clients that are saving millions of dollars annually, instead of maybe automating that process and, gathering structured information, but then having a human check every single piece. So you can see how just adding an additional step in a process that would include, one of these other skills through AI or machine learning, then, you're extending your capability through automation. And that will allow your organization to actually think and react at the speed of thought. Because right now, we are kind of dependent on this delayed feedback reaction of time and effort. But, the whole concept that retail has around 360-degree view of the client, wouldn't it be great to fully understand at every moment what it's like the moment a client becomes a customer to the moment that client is no longer a customer and you're bringing them back to try and, repeat become a repeat customer, whether it's apparel or grocery or whatever the case may be. You want to have that streamlined feel. I mean, a really good example for me is thinking, it would really be great if I would have, I think about airlines a lot. It'd be great if I would have received this 20% off voucher for a trip, if they would have known that I was flying to that area, in a week or so. Well, how could they know that information? Well, I scheduled it, but they're offering me this. It's not going to be available for that trip now. It's going to, expire. So you got to use it really quick and you got to figure it out. Well, being able to tie into all of those customer systems, what they're doing with the clients, the feedback surveys, everything like that, chatbot, whatever the case may be, they want to have all interaction touches. And at any moment in time that a person from, a major airline wants to needs to have a conversation with a customer, they can review the information in the system and they can see everything about that client and be able to answer any of their questions that they may have and get to a point to where, well, great, they had a call. Is there a promotion that we can offer them on this call proactively? I also see clients really doing a lot of cool stuff in retail. Imagine being able to have a mobile app and, you always use your mobile app, you're shopping, you get discounts and things like that. But, sometimes you still shop on your iPad or your computer at home, and you're not using the app, you're using maybe their website. And let's say you're signed in and, you leave a few items in the cart on accident maybe, but you've left them there and you haven't logged back in a week or so. But you remember that you had to get that one thing from the store, that store. And so as you walk in, the mobile app could notify you immediately saying, hey, I just saw that you walked in our store. What are you looking for? And it says, because you've also left these items in the cart, and you can type in what you're looking for, and then it can actually show you what aisle it's on, where it is. And then even while you're walking to that aisle, it could be providing you with suggested pricing based on your previous purchase history. And all this is really powered by those digital workers doing the information moving and information gathering, and then using machine learning and AI capabilities to help them, upsell their clients and provide a much greater customer experience. So, there's just endless possibilities. And I think hyperautomation is a unique term that's going to stick in the market, and organizations need to take it seriously, but understand it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that, if you can't build the right foundation with RPA, then trying to implement a robust and healthy, extended automation with AI or machine learning on top of that is going to be really difficult. It's almost like building a house on the sand versus building a house on a slab. So that's definitely something that I recommend, clients think about and take into consideration when trying to plan their journey.
Yeah, this has been very informative, and I know our podcast is probably getting a little long here, but I do have a couple more questions for you, Matt, if you and my listeners can hang on. One specifically is around, how to get started, kind of take us back to the beginning of the conversation where we laid out, or you laid out, those 5 stages, kind of that proof of value to the business, not proving the technology because the technology's proven, building out that robust pipeline of processes and getting that C-suite engaged, moving into that COE and getting that entire company sort of aligned behind you before you can really, I love the way you phrased it, phase 4, catch fire and really go gangbusters, until moving into 5, which is really this transformational stage where your digital workers are almost on par and playing on equal footing with many of your human workers. But take me back and walk me through, how do I even get started? So a lot of our listeners are probably wanting to jump both feet into the deep pool. What floaty should they pick up when they jump in? How do you even get started? How do they get to having that robust pipeline of processes such that they can really now go and prove the value to the business through a project, a proof of value project?
Well, I think a lot of it so much depends on understanding your organization's potential. And so if my advice would really be that if a company wants to do this right, then, this is something that, they should be targeting for C-suite education as soon as humanly possible. And you should really be looking to identify as a company, what are our areas that are most ready for automation, and bringing those team members together to work with your organizational strategic team. So you want to bring in those who are responsible for your IT strategy and those that are responsible for your business strategy. And those two people should really be tied at the hip, because you're going to need the stakeholders from IT, governance, infrastructure, all the things that you would traditionally support from an IT perspective in your organization. And you also need the ability to, on the business side, to identify the process, to document those processes, to create that pipeline. And so you don't have to have a fully robust pipeline and all built out, but you really want to have, your first year's worth of automations kind of identified. And I think that that's really one of the first key areas that organizations don't do. They may identify one process and then they spend 6 months without doing any further discovery, but they're getting trained and they're building out and they're doing that process. And all of a sudden, they've got a team that's ready to do more automations and support those automations, but they're just kind of sitting on the bench because they weren't proactively also designing that future roadmap of processes. So it's kind of a combination of things, and oftentimes, in traditional procurement cycles, when business wants something or IT wants something because they think it's going to help either business or their own, IT or whatever the case may be, they often, are purchasing in silos. And I think that's another big mistake that organizations make, is that they don't bring those stakeholders to the table right up front. The very first education session and the first few more after that, rolling out, the proper operating model so that they have the right governance and procedures in place, rolling out, the education process with security and IT, and then rolling out the right things within business so that they pick the right people in business to kick off this program. And so much of that really does kind of depend on what level of executive sponsorship they have, because if they're trying to, pull themselves up by the bootstraps and do it, on the cheap, then, there's probably about a 99% chance they're going to fail, and, it can be a black eye on their reputation or political capital in that organization. And so, it really does have to be a jointly owned effort. There can't just be one single person who's trying to hog all the glory for themselves. And so I would say that organizationally speaking, the sooner that this can become an organizational initiative, the sooner they can be successful. But, when getting started, so often you just got to bring the right stakeholders to the table. And if you're doing that and including all those stakeholders, and I'd encourage you to have a discussion with an organization when you're speaking to them, like, hey, who are going to be the most important stakeholders, if this, is adopted and goes to success and scale, who are those people, and how do we get them in here? And ensure that those people are part of every meeting until, through the end of your entire maturity process, because they're going to have ownership up front. And I think that too often organizations wait to bring those key stakeholders into play until maybe they've proved things out or done things more. But before you even prove anything out, if those stakeholders aren't really on board, it's going to significantly elongate your potential to roll out and to be successful and, reach automation scale.
Great. Just love that detail there. And last but not least, before my final question, just a little bit around time to value. So, I know, having worked with many customers of Blue Prism, that time to value can be very quick. And then, of course, as you scale, you continue to get more value over time. And total cost of ownership of a digital workforce is very advantageous in the hands of the business that is deploying that workforce. Can you talk a little bit about what you see your customers' typical time to value is? Is it, the 2.5 or 3 years that you kind of laid out to get through all 5 stages, or do companies start seeing value immediately, and then that just grows over time?
Yeah, I would say that they definitely start seeing value well before that. We have many customers, and I've had many who receive, a extreme value within the first 3 or 6 months of going live, because they did all the proper work up front. They understood they needed change management. They had all the right stakeholders involved. They checked all those boxes and were able to automate a major process that delivers, millions of dollars annually and pays back 40x ROI. That's a little extreme, but it's not unrealistic if done the right way. Now, I think it's important for people to understand that the total cost of ownership, is always at its highest when you're implementing a new piece of technology. And I don't think that's anything groundbreaking there, but it's tried and true with RPA and automation. And so you should have your total cost of ownership should be at its greatest as you're rolling out, and then consistently dropping over the lifetime of your practice within automation. So I think that's a really key aspect to think about. But yeah, it can happen if done the right way up front. But I often, conversely see clients who, pick a transactional process. In finance, we have 10 workers that spend, 5 minutes a week on this, and they just hate it. Can we automate this as a pilot? And you're like, yeah, we can automate it, but the cost to do it is prohibitive on what the return on that would be even annually. So, I think oftentimes clients aren't, the best at, and this could be partner problems with the vendors, could be problems with the partner or the customer. They haven't been picking the right processes. And I think that for companies who have these horror stories, or you're reading about RPA isn't scaling or things like that, it's because they tried shortcuts. They treated it as a project versus a program. They weren't interested in transforming their company. They were just interested in getting in a buzzword technology to say that they already have it in house. Well, you've really got to put your effort into it. And if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And that's what I tell all my clients, that, look, if this is just a pet project and you're just kind of doing this and you don't have any future vision for it, then, that's not someone that I'm going to want to spend time and effort with, because there's so many other clients out there that really do see this for what it is and want to do it the right way. So I would just encourage organizations that are listening that, if you're not taking it to extreme ownership, you really have to take this approach to it. And, I don't think that clients should be worried about, failing. You're going to make mistakes. This is a totally new approach to doing business and transforming business. It's easier than any other way that you can do it today. It still doesn't mean that it's easy, and I really want to impart on that, because while, you don't have to be a coder to create these automations and to monitor them and manage them. Once you want to get more invested and do more advanced projects, you will need a more robust team dedicated to this, with more technical capabilities. But, I think that it has to be 100% commitment from the organization. You have to pick the right processes in the beginning, and you have to ensure that you're properly evangelizing and driving change management. If you're not doing those things, then it doesn't matter how great you are at anything. You're not going to succeed with automation at scale. So I would say that if you're going to write anything down from this discussion, please write those aspects down, because it's still today I see clients who have had the product for 2 or 3 years, and they're not even close to being out of phase 2 because they've just tried to keep things close to the vest. They aren't interested in evangelizing throughout the organization. And then maybe another piece of the organization looks at other technology, and then your technology has been sidelined because you were selfish and didn't try to drive it, or you just weren't aware of how you were making mistakes. So I think it's really, really important for organizations to take a step back and to think, what's our really big picture vision here? And if they can establish a vision, let's say that they should be establishing 3, 6, 9, 12-month visions. They should have a 1, 2, and 3 year vision, and they should be working up to those visions and changing them as dictates, but always driving towards a vision that they want to get to. I definitely would say that those are the key things I would be looking at if someone were to hire me tomorrow, for instance, and say, we need you to run our entire automation business. We haven't started anything. The first thing I would do is make sure I had the right stakeholders involved. And if I didn't, then, I would be very upfront saying, I don't think this is going to succeed. And if it does succeed, it's going to take, twice as long as it should. So I think you have to really address everything up front, and it starts with the stakeholders.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. You've certainly given us a lot of great insights today and a lot for our listeners to take away and plan for a successful transformation of their businesses. So we've gotten to the point in the show now where it is time for what I like to call the Zena Zinger. This is a question that I'm going to ask you that we at no point previous to today have talked about, but it's fun. So enjoy. Matt, if digital workers were athletes, what type of athlete would they be and why?
I would say, I would like to say golfer, because I think that, all the, just a pure golf swing and great, you can hit it long and far, but, there's so much more that goes into having a successful round of golf. Can't tell I love golf, but, I think that that analogy does kind of fall flat when you imagine how important it is to have your digital workers interacting with your digital workers and it becoming a concert of teamwork, where you're leveraging the most intelligent types of technology with the most intelligent workers that you can bring into your organization to drive, the most successful business outcomes. So I do think it's more like a basketball team or a baseball team where, all it takes is one person not doing, their role in a play or, like in basketball and offense, or being out of position in defense, or being distracted, things like that. Digital workers don't have bathroom breaks. They don't go on vacation. They don't do those things. And so, if you can create a harmonious plan for these digital workers and execute them, then they execute flawlessly. And I think that we see that with some of the most mature sports teams out there who can work together and are, they can give nonverbals, they can, whatever the case may be. And it's like the other person is in their brain and they're sharing, information with their brain because they understand each other so much. And I think that that's probably the best way to think about, that comparison. They've got to be a well-oiled machine that interacts with, flawlessness to run a play perfectly. Football is another good example. You've got 11 people on the field and run one offensive play. If just one person doesn't do their job, that play can be, a loss of yards versus gaining yards. So, you really want to think of this in the same manner where if you are missing one stakeholder, then, you never get a first down. If you're, missing, intelligent skills, then you never, truly advance past the large scaling curve that hits. You're going to have to incorporate more intelligent skills and abilities to further your organization's success capabilities. So, I think that's a good question. I'm glad you gave that because I like those types of analogies.
Most excellent. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us today here on Generation Digital Workforce. It was a pleasure to have you, and I look forward to having you potentially on my show again in the future.
Well, I will always be happy to be a guest on your show, and the best of luck to your upcoming shows, and looking forward to working with you in the future.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone out there in listener land. Until next time on Generation Digital Workforce, have a great day.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.